Ladies and gentlemen, in what feels like a year-long wait to talk about Odyssey Pro Wrestling's inaugural event, Set Sail, which just happened here just a short time ago. We couldn't think of a better person to talk about the inaugural event, Set Sail, and obviously somebody who was a part of it. She has done a phenomenal job also writing for Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and you can catch her article here of the inaugural event, Set Sail, over at odysseyprowrestling.co.uk. She also does a phenomenal job interviewing a who's who of people backstage for Odyssey Pro Wrestling. She is also a reporter for KOW and president of the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society. She's got so many roles. I think I probably lost count at this point, but all for very good reasons. So without further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, Odyssey Pro Wrestling, reporter and interviewer, Lucy Sir.
Oh, thank you so much.
Lucy, I think that's the third.
And when you were still going as well. I thought you'd finished and you're still going. Thank you so
Well,
much.
because
Tom,
Lucy,
for having me
for
back.
you, I gotta make sure it's even better than the last time, and then better than the first time. And I'm sure that when we have you on again before the middle of October, it'll be even better than that one. That's because you're how important you are here to us here on the Sports Report and on Sports Wire Radio here. And I'm tongue twisted just saying all those different roles that you have. I'm probably missing one or two, but it is good to have you. And how the hell are you?
Oh, yeah, it's great to be back. And you know what? I mean, that intro is probably going to be about 10 minutes long if you're going to try and make it better every time. I'm doing really well. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to talk about Set Sail finally in retrospect rather than in anticipation. It's really exciting.
You know, it's funny you said that because we had spoke with Simon Hill. We didn't really touch upon too much of last week's Set Sail with him, but that was what I said. I said, Simon, it's finally good to be able to talk with something that happened rather than something that was about to happen or we thought could happen. So it's finally glad we can look back, because I feel like we were looking back on like 2019 matches with 2-Bit versus Lucas Neon and what happened when Sheriff Steele and everything else happened with him and King Ryan Grayson. And now we finally get to talk about something that actually happened, something that's going to build us to the future here. And obviously, congratulations, though, on all the great things that you've done with Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and obviously your article, which we plugged here at the top. And I'm not quite sure if our intro was quite 10 minutes with you. It might have been more like 3 or 4, but I could see where you're coming from with that. But obviously, your article, which detailed all the great things that happened here at Odyssey Pro Wrestling, which you can catch over at odysseyprowrestling.co.uk. And of course, you can follow Odyssey Pro Wrestling on Twitter at OPW_UK. Facebook, you can like them at Odyssey Pro Wrestling. Instagram, you can also follow them at Odyssey Pro Wrestling. So there's a lot of plugs there that we gave in one. And Lucy, for our worldwide audience listening now on SportsWire, talk to me about writing this article and what it meant to you in terms of giving us the Set Sail report, which everybody has viewed by now.
You know, it was really fun to write because I'd been waiting for so long to be able to do it and actually to write any sort of report of a wrestling show. Like you said, it's like we've been looking back on matches from 2019, so I haven't been able to report on a show that I've seen live for so long. So it was such a good feeling, and it was just like getting back to what I know, what I love to do, being able to sit there and enjoy the show with my friends and in a jam-packed stadium. Well, I said stadium, it's obviously not a stadium, the Carlton, but it felt like a stadium because the atmosphere was electric. But yeah, I mean, it was just a great feeling, and I hope the article kind of conveys the excitement and the energy that was there on that night. It was brilliant, and to be able to share that to someone like you who unfortunately couldn't be there, that's great. That's like a privilege for me to be able to do that.
Listen, Lucy, I saw the videos all over Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and for all I know, it could have been a stadium. It could have been an arena because 250 fans felt like 25,000 fans. And I got to ask you this because you mentioned it here and your friends were there with you, and I'm sure many were from the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society. But what did that mean to you? After everything we've talked about, everything that we've went through in the world, to be able to be with them, but also you were with them this time in an official role, in an official capacity. I mean, what did it mean to you on a personal level to have your friends there and they got to see you now as a part of the show?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It was definitely different to if, we just went to a show and we were just watching and we're all just fans, like to kind of have this role there. It didn't take away from how special it was though. Like as like a personal kind of moment for me, it felt like we kind of succeeded. We've got to the end of almost, well, obviously not. We're obviously not at the end of COVID-19, but it felt like this was a light at the end of the tunnel that we'd finally reached. And to share that with some of my favorite people was really special. It was strange, like having to leave them at the interval because I had to go, and at the end of the show to go film promos and things was quite strange and quite new to me, and I think perhaps quite strange to them as well. But they were so supportive and so kind, and even waited for me after the show, which was really nice. They really appreciated that. It was just great to be able to share that moment with them, because for me it was a huge milestone for me. It was, I've been writing for KOW for quite a long time now, but to be able to kind of take this role as an interviewer, it was a big moment for me personally, and to have these people there who were always so supportive of me was really special.
Well, you deserve it, Lucy. You're a hard worker. You're a great writer. Your love for the wrestling business is unmatched. It's second to none. I mean, you were clearly on your way to bigger and better things, and a rising tide will always lift all boats. And I know that you definitely will lift the boats of many people's tides in the professional wrestling world, and especially Odyssey Pro Wrestling. And obviously, we haven't got a chance to really talk about the event here. We had Simon on last week, but we really didn't touch upon it too much. It was more about Simon's career and him being on the call. We might have talked about one of the matches at most, but for our worldwide audience listening here now on Sports Wire Radio, set the tables for us the first match that opened Set Sail, and that was the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus versus the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera, and set the tables for us and what that match was like and the outcome, of course.
Yeah, so this match was definitely one that I was anticipating a lot, because you've got Rick Marcus, who has wrestled in Morecambe before. He's a well-known face, and he's absolutely brutal in the ring. And it was funny to see how in KOW he's massively hated, but here in Odyssey he was cheated because he was against Lance Rivera, who's just he's very annoying, very patronising. Just the Playboy Prince. It's a perfect nickname for him, and he was taunting the crowd the whole time, dishing out insults to the fans, and who gave them straight back. So it was really fun to see, really entertaining, that aspect of it. But even though he was very gobby, he was trying to avoid Rick for the start of the match, and he was running around the ring trying to avoid him. He sat down on a fan's lap at the start, trying to avoid Rick, which was quite funny. But Rick chased him back into the ring, and both of them showed like amazing strength and agility. And it was very back and forth. It was a difficult to call match, and it was really good. There was lots of really brutal offense, brutal like chokeholds, German suplexes, which was really impressive. Yeah, Lance Rivera hit Rick, who is not a small man by any means, with a deadlift German, which was very impressive. But ultimately, Rick came out on top. He caught everyone off guard with a huge spear, which came out of nowhere, and that ended the match. I mean, no one was getting up from that. So that was a big moment. Rick Marcus winning the very first OPW match in history, which was a really big milestone for him. I'm sure that's going to catapult him to probably the main event picture, which he rightfully deserves. But I don't think it's the last we've seen of Lance, because he actually nearly attacked Rick after the match, and he had to be restrained by the referee, which was a shame. But I think he's going to be keen to come back and make more of a name for himself. So I think we'll have to look out for him at Stormy Waters.
You know, Lucy, I had a very good feeling that the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus, was going to win this match, just because of the build-up here, and also just because of the strength that he was in. And I kind of think that the physical condition of the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus, was just a little much, I think, for the Playboy Prince and sort of their contrasting styles. So I wasn't surprised here at all that the Cumbrian Outlaw got a win. Although it is a bit weird to think of the Cumbrian Outlaw as beloved in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, because for all those months, Lucy, we always talked about the Cumbrian Outlaw in KOW, and they hated him. They hated him. So the fact now you've kind of seen the roles reverse here a little bit, I think it's a good thing. And also congratulations to Rick on a definitely well-deserved victory here. Another match that I was really intrigued to talk about, I know we promoted it quite a bit here on the show over the past several weeks, and we had pretty much everybody on the show that that could talk, with the exception, obviously, of Nightmare, since we know that Nightmare doesn't talk. But we had, obviously, this team of Synergy, the big thick boys, Troy Ryan and Anderson Daniels, and then obviously the unhinged Will Carter, who we know very well his story from KOW. And somebody who was added late to this was the guiding light, Isaiah Quinn, who's definitely become one of my favorites, Lucy. I want to talk about somebody that's a great talker. I think that the guiding light, Isaiah Quinn, has a very good future in the business here when it comes to being a manager and a mouthpiece. And this was a really intriguing match to me here. So for our worldwide audience listening here on Sports Wire Radio, Lucy, give us the rundown here when it came to Synergy versus the team of Freak Show.
Well, yeah, you're right. Everything you said is 100%. Yeah, so Isaiah Quinn was definitely important part to this match. And he's, like you say, he's full of charisma. He's very easy to dislike or like character. It depends on how you look at it. You know, he did a very good job of making the Morecambe fans dislike him. He was, you know, yelling at them to shut up and whatnot. And yeah, he had his book, and the fans who were in front of me kept on shouting, "Go put your Bible away" or something. And he was like, "It's not a Bible." And he wasn't taking any of the fans' nonsense. And he played a big part in the match. He did attempt a distraction quite a few times, which you might have predicted. But Synergy, as you probably would predict, didn't let that get to them. They were full of energy the whole time. They were so entertaining. They're a hilarious pair. They're absolutely so amazing to watch in the ring because they're really high intensity, really athletic, obviously really strong, big thick boys, definitely, but they're also hilarious and they're full of character, they're full of charisma. So getting these two teams in the ring against each other was like two kind of extremes of charisma against each other, two completely different extremes of charisma. You know, the Freak Show are incredible in the ring as well. I mean, that's not to take away from anything that they do in the ring, but their supernatural eeriness was definitely gave them a bit of an edge. When they came out to the ring, they were stood in front of fans and looking at them, and it was a bit creepy, but they translate it well in the ring. The acrobatic, they pull tricks out the sleeve that you're not expecting, but ultimately Synergy came out on top. Their double team finisher was just too much for them. I mean, Anderson Daniels even came in and fought both members of the Freak off with his train of destruction. He was amazing. And yeah, they hit their double team finisher for the 1-2-3. I think Isaiah was visibly disappointed, but it was obvious that they're going to come back and do better things.
Yeah, I kind of think, Lucy, that was a match that I'm going to assume that the strength of Synergy might have been just a bit much for the team of Freak Show, because obviously you look at the shape that Synergy's in between the both of them. I mean, Anderson and Troy, I mean, it's almost as if like those guys are not human. They're not real. So that might have been the difference here in the match. And I kind of agree with you that I think that this is probably not going to be the last that we've heard from the team of Freak Show, especially with the guiding light, Isaiah Quinn. And I think also, Lucy, the team of Synergy, if you're going to look at the tag team division, especially after a win like that, though, they have to be at the top of the list when it comes to tag teams right now in Odyssey Pro Wrestling.
Oh yeah, definitely. They've kind of shown to everyone that they can't be ignored, that they deserve to be at the top of the list if a tag team championship belt is ever revealed, which I hope it is, that they should be in the discussion for that, definitely. They work amazingly as a team. I mean, they come as a pair, and I can definitely see big things in their future. But it'd be interesting to see, like, they might even end up going for individual championships. I don't know. But I think they're all-round wrestlers, so they can do it in a team and they can do it individually. But I think each of the support kind of gives them an edge. So you're definitely right. They're definitely high up in the ranks of Odyssey's tag team division.
Absolutely. And I think that we got a very good feeling that we're going to see a lot more of Synergy, just like we're going to see a lot more of the Freak Show, along with the guiding light, Isaiah Quinn. And we're also going to see a lot more of our guests here to kick off today's Sports Report show here on Sports Wire Radio. That is our very good friend, Lucy Simons, who does a phenomenal job covering all the great things that Odyssey Pro Wrestling has to offer as a writer and an interviewer. She's also president of the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society, and we are honored to have her back here for a third time now on the show. So I am the host of the Sports Report and the station manager here of Sports Wire Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryce. And of course, you can follow Sports Wire Radio on Facebook at Sports Wire Radio. You can also catch us now on sportnarium.com/play player, and we're in the near and distant future going to have a new website, some new things also that'll be more interactive, I think, when it comes to SportsWire Radio. But for now, for the time being, you can catch us on sportnarium.com/player, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can catch all the great shows that SportsWire Radio has to offer here. And I think we got to get Lucy on some of these shows. I think, Lucy, at this point, we have like 5 pro wrestling shows, and I don't even count myself as a pro wrestling show, Lucy, because I'm not a professional wrestler. I'm not involved in the business, but there are many shows that we have here on SportsWire Radio that are in the professional wrestling world and are in the professional wrestling business that I think Lucy would make for an excellent guest for. We will certainly make that happen. Of course, you can also follow the Sports Report on Instagram at the Sports Report 2021. My Twitter at Thomas Price 2017. I'm approaching 3,000 followers at this point. So obviously very happy for whatever that's worth. You can also catch us on Facebook at Sports Report X, and of course our YouTube page, which I don't really update too much, but you can catch us at the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show. But we are talking all things related to Odyssey Pro Wrestling, our favorite wrestling promotion around, with one of the best in the business, that is the very great Lucy Simons. And I cannot stress enough all the great things that Lucy has done. I think, Lucy, maybe this will be 10 minutes worth of intros at this point, because if you add our middle break here, our closing, when I'm sure I'll give you a big intro, and the opening here to kick things off here tonight, maybe it will be 10 minutes. So, Lucy, you might know much more than we realize. Well, we know that anyway. But, Lucy, another match here that very intriguing. And he came on the show, I want to say, maybe about a month and a half before set sail. That is the Rat King 2-Bit, who right now, I really think, leave aside what you think about 2-Bit. 2-Bit is on the path where he might really be one of the next breakout stars in professional wrestling. We've seen him in BWR, where he's got the Cruiserweight title. We know all about his run in KOW, and he had an open challenge that he had announced, and we talked about it here with him on the show about 6 weeks or so before the event, and that was the third match here on the card. So for our worldwide audience listening here on SportsWire Radio, Lucy, give us the details on what happened in the open challenge that the Rat King, along with the Rat Queen Jennifer, had announced, and who actually decided to answer getting in the ring with 2-Bit.
Yeah, so this match was very highly anticipated because there was no hints whatsoever on who was going to be answering the opening challenge. So everyone was kind of making their guesses. And I think a lot of people thought, is it going to be Andre Decker? Because we've heard a lot from him. And
that was my guess, actually. Believe it or not, Lucy, I got to say, I actually said that on the air, I think. I thought that would be the guy for whatever reason, because they kind of had a history at KOW. That, I believe it or not, that was my guess.
Yeah, I mean, that I think it would have been a bit of a shock, but it would have, that would have made sense. I remember I was talking to the guys who sat in front of me. They thought it was going to be him. So I think everyone was very excited to see who it was going to be. And it actually turned out to be Sexy Kev Lloyd, who is a bit of a legend in the UK indie scene in wrestling. He's been around for years. He's been everywhere. He's done everything, especially in Markham as well. Everyone loved to see him. He's hilarious. He lived up to the character of Sexy Kev. Amazing dance moves. But that's not just what he's about. In the ring, he really did bring it to 2-Bit. There was a lot of mat wrestling as well that was going on, which was one of my favourite things. I love watching that, which was awesome. But yeah, like you said, 2-Bit's doing big things. Like you said, he's BWR Cruiserweight champion, which is huge. I think he kind of brought confidence with him into the ring. So yeah, and I think with Jennifer by his side as well, this kind of gave him an edge that we might not have seen from him before. And I think this is what he's bringing into 2021. So he chop blocked Sexy Kev at one point. So he had an injured knee for the rest of the match, and he of course targeted this for the rest of the match. He's deceitful, and you don't really want to like him, but you have to appreciate the kind of resourcefulness. So yeah, he targeted this for the rest of the match, and ultimately that meant that Kev was defeated. Bit was able to lock in the rat trap after Jennifer distracted Kev, and that was Bit's match. It was a dominant victory, I have to say. But you know, the fans absolutely hated him, but he didn't care, and he did an amazing job. You have to commend him for that.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that we've talked about 2-Bit quite a bit, especially in his very memorable runs in KOW. But when we had him on the show before set sail, I even felt from the first time that we had on the Rat King that he just seemed different. He just seemed different even from when we last saw him in the ring back a year and a half ago. So the fact that he dominated was no surprise to me. And I really got a big feeling that 2021 is going to be a huge year for him. And I really think the sky is the limit. And I think that he's only going to do bigger and better things. So congratulations to him on a dominant victory. And I think getting a victory over somebody like Sexy Kev is a very, very huge win. It's a statement win. I think it shows that Two-Bit is going to be a main event player here in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, along with everywhere else he's going to wrestle. And then, Lucy, we had the main event of the first half of the show in the Carlton for Odyssey Pro Wrestling. And this was a match also that I know we talked about with you quite a bit. And I know it changed a little bit from when we originally discussed the match with you and also a few other people. And talk to me about the women's match here. And we know that a couple of different participants weren't able to make it at Odyssey Pro Wrestling general manager, our good friend Ethan Edwards, had announced. So give us the details of who was actually in it and what went on, and give us your thoughts here on this now one-on-one match of the first half of the show here for Odyssey Pro Wrestling when it came to the women's match.
Yeah, so it was obviously slightly disappointing. We found out that Lizzie Evo couldn't make it due to unforeseen circumstances, and Alexis Falcon is actually injured. So the dynamics really changed, and it was a one-on-one match. Luckily, though, Falcon was there, and she addressed the crowd as a returning hero. She made actually a really emotional speech and said that she's going to be the very first OPW Women's Champion, which is a huge statement. But more importantly, we had the match, which was still brilliant. It doesn't matter that it wasn't what we expected. It was still a brilliant match between Gia Adams and Tonga. Tonga was full of attitude, as we've come to expect from her, but she brought it to the mat and she showed her strength and her tactics as well. But Gia, was undeniable. She is a huge presence in the ring and she's got unbelievable amounts of strength, so that certainly came into play. And yeah, so we also had Tonga was really heavy on trying to stop the fans from encouraging Adams, because that was kind of Adams' biggest asset, I think, in this match, was the fact that the fans were firmly behind her. So Tonga even tried to cover Adams' ears to stop her from being encouraged by the fans, but that didn't work, and Adams fought back. She hit some huge chops that were really, really loud. And yeah, no, Gia rallied back. It nearly got the 3 count, and she was so close to winning, but unfortunately, when she had her up ready to hit her finisher, Tonga raked her eyes, and that meant that she was able to capture the victory. So it was disappointing to see an underhanded victory like this, but I guess you have to commend Tonga for pulling it out of the bag like that and getting herself out of a sticky situation. It was a brilliant match nonetheless, and I'm definitely looking forward to Stormy Waters. Hopefully we'll see Lizzie Evo and Alexis Falcon coming back.
I want to go back to something real quick before we get to the second half of the card, and it came to Alexis Falcon and her statement that she wants to be the first OPW Women's Champion. And Lucy, obviously you were there at Set Sail, and you hear something like that, I gotta think it's gotta grab your attention. And seeing the fact that Tonga was able to get a pretty monumental victory here over Gia Adams, who in her own right has established herself, is definitely somebody who's an emerging pro wrestling star, especially in the women's division throughout the UK. But I gotta think then, with a win here that Tonga got, regardless of how she got the victory, I would have to think, Lucy, now I know it's early and we still have a ways to go even till we get to Stormy Waters, but I have to think that we would be on a crash collision course between Tonga and Alexis Falcon.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you have to consider the other 2 girls in this conversation as well, but I think you're right. I do think this victory has put Tonga at the forefront of everyone's minds. And then, yeah, like you say, we've got Alexis Falcon on the other hand, who has won championships in Morecambe before. So yeah, these 2, when they clash, I mean, you're not going to want to miss that. That's going to be huge. But the other 2 women are going to be desperate as well to get their names up there as well. So I think they're going to have that added desperation, which might give them a bit of an edge. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I can't wait to see if there's going to be a women's championship and how that's going to unfold.
Well, we're going to certainly find out, Lucy, and I'm very excited to see the women's division here in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, because you think about the women's division here. I mean, you talk about even these 4 wrestlers, and Lizzie Evo and Gia Adams and Tonga and Alexis Falcon. I mean, they're all superstars. They're all probably going to be world champions somewhere, and it very well might be in Odyssey Pro Wrestling. So I think that's going to be fun to see how the women's division develops here and who eventually becomes the champion. And then that leads us into the second half of the event here. And I know that Chris Brooker came out, and I know that the fans didn't really tolerate Chris Brooker too long. So where we are here when it comes to the next match, in a match that I think I've probably talked about more than any other match, I think, here on the card. And I think you'll know what this is, Lucy, here. And that's Scotty Rock and the Natural Born Fighter, RP Davis. And I know that that was a match that a lot of people wanted to see. A lot of people paid their money to come to Set Sail to see what the Natural Born Fighter, RP Davis, can do. Because if you hadn't seen him as a boxer in Morecambe, now you got that chance to see what he could do in the wrestling ring here. And Scotty Rock is obviously no pushover. He has had a lot of success throughout the wrestling scene in the UK, especially in BWR as a cruiserweight champion, a tag team champion. So this was a match that was in the making for many, many months. So Lucy, for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportswire Radio, you gotta talk to us about the outcome here of the match between Scotty Rock and the Natural Born Fighter, RP Davis.
It was absolutely a huge moment to see RP Davis making his Morecambe wrestling debut, and he got a huge reaction from the crowd. To be honest, I was surprised. It was a massive reaction, definitely the biggest reaction of the night so far. But yeah, when these two got in the ring together, it was quite unique because obviously you had Scotty Rock, who was very frustrated that all the attention had been on RPD in the build-up, and he felt like he deserved more of the limelight, and he kind of proved it in the ring that he deserves attention, because he was very impressive in the ring. You know, he had some huge moves up his sleeve. He was sneaky as well, and he was high paced. But RPD answered him every move. RPD had an answer for, and you wouldn't believe that RPD hasn't been a wrestler for his whole life. You know, he really is a natural, and he brought it to Scotty Rock and proved that the attention he's been getting has been well deserved. RPD, he didn't only have good moves, but he also had the smarts as well. We had Rock head up to the top rope for a moonsault. RPD moved at just the right moment, which was his chance to kind of flip the match in his direction. He was hitting a flurry of moves, and it was absolutely gigantic. The crowd was so behind him, and I think that really spurred him on. And it did seem as if Rock had actually flipped it his way, because like I said, he was very good in the ring, and he never really slowed down. So even when RPD came back with all these huge moves, Rock was still very much on it. But I think RPD's way of finishing the match was perfect to answer Rock, because he caught him in midair with a huge elbow strike, and he must have knocked him out, because, you know, no one could have got up from that. That's what got him the 1-2-3. And it really was, it was similar to how Rick Marcus ended his match with a spear out of nowhere, like this huge elbow out of nowhere. It was massive. You can see why them two are friends. You can tell they've been training together. Yeah, and it was an awesome match, and you have to give it to Scotty Rock. He did an amazing job. I think we'll see him at Stormy Waters. I think he's got some unfinished business. He's still not very happy, and I mean, you can hardly blame him after coming off a loss after working so hard. But yeah, he wasn't happy at all as he declined RPD's attempt at a handshake, which was a shame. But RPD then went to the mic and he thanked the fans for being behind him, which was a really nice moment. So it was brilliant to see him in his Morecambe wrestling debut.
But I understand, Lucy, and I'm sure we'll get back to the outcome of this match here, but I understand that there was somebody that attempted to come out and come into the ring here.
Yeah, so after the match, after RPD was on the mic, he announced the OPW title tournament and that he was the first entrant. So that was really exciting. And everyone was, about that, obviously, but then everyone was caught totally off guard. Andre Decker took this chance to make his appearance that he had promised. So we were kind of expecting him, but at this moment it was a total surprise. He ran out of absolutely nowhere. He ran through the crowd. He launched an absolutely brutal attack on RP Davis. It took all the security guards to get him off, and RPD was trying to fight back, so he had to be restrained as well. Decker was dragged out of the building, the demand of Ethan Edwards, who came out to try and stop the chaos. And I'm sure you've seen the video on social media. Decker says he's going to come back, and he seems very unhappy, to say the least. So God knows what's going to happen at Stormy Waters. I mean, I dread to think, but also I can't wait, because I'm sure it's going to be huge. Whatever it is, it's going to be interesting to see how the roster responds to him. I mean, Ethan Edwards has said that he's banned, but I don't think that's going to stop him.
You know, it's funny you said that, Lucy, because I was actually going to ask you that. And I know that we kind of saw this coming to some extent, because we had Andre Decker on and we had the Natural Born Fighter, RP Davis, on right before, literally, Lucy, just hours before Set Sail. And the two of them didn't seem to like each other. Now, obviously, we didn't know that Andre Decker was going to come out and give a brutal attack to the natural born fighter, but we knew that there was some type of dislike between the two of them. We thought it might happen, I don't know, maybe outside a bar in Morecambe, or we thought maybe it'd be in the parking lot, but we didn't realize that Andre Decker was going to make his presence felt in the way that he did. But if Ethan Edwards has banned Andre Decker from being a participant in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and he was able to attack the natural born fighter RP Davis, I mean, where do you think that we go from here when it comes to this situation between the two of them?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because I was thinking literally just today to myself, like, would it not be easier and avoid more trouble if Ethan Edwards just agreed to sign Andre Decker in the first place and let him have a place in the roster, which is what he wanted? But I think he's proved that he is a brutal competitor, and he perhaps doesn't deserve it because of the way he acts. I think he's ruined his chance of being on the roster now, but also I think RP Davis is going to want revenge, and Ethan Edwards might have to honour that. He might have to give him a match, and it's going to be really interesting to see where we go from here. I hope to see a match between the two. I really do. I think it'll be brutal. And, Andre Decker is an amazing wrestler, and he's clearly got passion and drive. So I think if we had him on the roster, I think it would be pretty brutal, but entertaining for the fans. I guess that's kind of what you want.
Well, I gotta say one thing. If you're in the matchmaking business and if you're Odyssey Pro Wrestling Management, there's an old expression, you might have to do what's best for business. And I kind of think, Lucy, what might be best for business is eventually one day, whether it's at Stormy Waters or elsewhere, the natural born fighter RP Davis versus Andre Decker, because I think people would pay a lot of money to see those two in the ring, because you want to talk about heavy hitters. You want to talk about guys that can pack punches. I think a lot of people in Morecambe might want to see that match. So that could be something to keep an eye on. You also have to wonder if General Manager Ethan Edwards is to lift the ban for Andre Decker and Odyssey Pro Wrestling. Does, let's say, the natural born fighter RP Davis go to management and say, listen, make the match, make it happen? Or does management decide, like I just said, Lucy, what's best for business? And what's best for business? Now, if I was a businessman, and we know that I am kind of a businessman here at Sportswire Radio, you do what's best for business. And what's best for business would be Andre Decker and the natural born fighter RP Davis, because that could main event pretty much any wrestling promotion out there. You name a promotion, you name a territory, even in America, people would want to see that kind of match. So, Lucy, I got a feeling that we're going to be talking to these two individuals in the near and distant future about what might happen. And let's just say the earth will rumble if Andre Decker and the natural born fighter RP Davis will be in the ring here. Lucy, another match, which I got to be honest with you, Lucy, this was the match I was most excited to see. I have to say, there was some matches that we talked about the most, like the natural born fighter RP Davis and Scotty Rock, like the tag team match between Synergy and Freak Show with the Guiding Light Isaiah Quinn. But this was the match here that I was really intrigued about. And maybe it's because of the history that these two men have outside the ring. Maybe it's because what they meant in KOW. But as you called it, and you got it perfect here, you hit it right on the nail on the head, Lucy. The battle of the generations here between Lucas Neon, who was making his debut, believe it or not, in Morecambe, against somebody that we know very well under a different name in KOW, but he's here as Mark Meltzer, the legendary Mark Meltzer. And this was a match here I really had a hard time picking who was going to win this one. So, Lucy, set the tables for us. Let us know what happened, especially for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportswire Radio, between Lucas Neon and the legendary Mark Meltzer.
Yeah, Tom, you weren't the only one who found it hard to call. I mean, I definitely did, and the audience were very conflicted on who to cheer for in this match. It was nice for a change to have this kind of match where you could get behind them both and just enjoy the match. Lucas Neon had a very big reaction, despite it being his first time wrestling in Morecambe, and Meltzer, of course, did as well, because he's a bit of a legend in the Morecambe scene. He's always done these impersonations and tributes to old legendary wrestlers, and this time it was Roddy Piper, who was probably my favourite wrestler of all time. So I really appreciated that. It was awesome. He came out with a kilt to the bagpipes, which was great. Yeah, it was a difficult one for anyone to call and anyone to choose a side. So the fact that it was back and forth was definitely a plus for the fans. Maybe you might have been surprised considering that, Mark Meltzer is quite a lot older than Lucas Neon. There's a big size difference as well, but they matched each other really well, and they were kind of very complimentary of each other's styles, which was good to see. And Neon was constantly fast paced. He had some really hard strikes. I feel like that's kind of his signature thing. Is he's got huge kicks, which looked really painful. But I think Meltzer, his experience gave him the edge in this match, because I think Neon might have let the excitement get to his head a little bit, and he went the second rope towards the end to try and I'm not sure what move he was trying to go for, because Meltzer took him out before he could pull it off, and ultimately that's what won him the match. So yeah, I think possibly experience won this bout, but I think it's not the end for Lucas Neon in Odyssey for sure. He's going to come back because the fans loved him, so I'm sure they'll be really keen to have him back. Unfortunately, though, there is something else I need to talk about with this match. The Freak Show actually came out halfway through, which was quite strange, with Isaiah Quinn. They didn't try and cause a distraction or anything. They sat on the stage and ate some crisps and just watched the match, which was very strange. Ultimately, that didn't affect the outcome of the match, which was good, but Meltzer was quite distracted by them when he walked out. He seemed a bit confused, like we all were. And we never really got any explanation for that. So I'm interested to see what comes of this in the next show. Hopefully, maybe the Freak Show will tell us why they did this. Maybe hopefully we'll get some development.
Well, Lucy, Nightmare's not going to tell us because Nightmare doesn't speak. So I'm going to have to point the finger at the guiding light Isaiah Quinn on potentially what that was about. And that was bizarre, to say the least, because if you think about it here, I didn't even know that there was any history between these individuals. I mean, and then they don't do anything. They're just sitting there and watching. I mean, listen, conversely, the other way around, Lucy, they could have been watching for Lucas Neon, and we really don't know what their reasons were into why they came out here. And why would the guiding light Isaiah Quinn be impressed with Mark Meltzer? I mean, there's a lot of answers that need to be found here. There's a lot of questions that have to be asked here between now and Stormy Waters, between this whole scenario here, between Freak Show, the guiding light Isaiah Quinn, Mark Meltzer, and I'm going to throw in Lucas Neon here because we really don't know what the motives were here. We just don't know. I mean, Lucy, I have no answers here. I know you've pretty much said the same thing here. I mean, we're going to try and reach out to obviously both parties involved here, and along with Lucas Neon, and see what they had to say about it, because it was very bizarre, and I can't think of an instance where you've seen something like that here. So there's definitely a lot that I'm sure we're going to unpack here in the coming weeks. And I know that, Lucy, you'll be a part of it as we are here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show on SportsWire Radio, the #1 global radio station, with our #1 writer, our #1 interviewer. She is one of the best in the business. She is an emerging star in her own right. Her name is Lucy Simons. She works with Odyssey Pro Wrestling as a writer and interviewer. She's also a president of the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society, which is obviously our favorite pro wrestling society. And if we were in Lancaster, we would make sure that we would join that group. Even though we are in school, Lucy, we would make sure that we would join that group. And we have a few more minutes with Lucy. And I am the host of the Sports Report. I am the station manager here of SportsWire Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryce, and we are talking all things related to one of our favorite topics here on SportsWire Radio, and that is Odyssey Pro Wrestling. And of course, you can follow Odyssey Pro Wrestling on Twitter at OPW_UK, Instagram at Odyssey Pro Wrestling, Facebook, you can like him at Odyssey Pro Wrestling. And of course, you can catch Lucy's article and many other great things on the Odyssey Pro Wrestling website at odysseyprowrestling.co.uk. To Lucy's article, you can go to odysseyprowrestling.co.uk/post/set-sale-report. So make sure you check that. And also, you got to follow Lucy on Twitter at CESAROSTAN, Cesaro Stan. Also catch her on Instagram at Lucy Symes1. There's so many great things that you can follow Lucy on. Also, the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society. Please follow them as well at LUPW_SOC. That's LUPW_SOC. And Lucy, we're trying to do the plugs for you. We know that we'll let you plug them as well. So from anything that I screwed up on, obviously, you can re-plug it and make sure everybody follows all the great things that you were doing. You're truly on your way to bigger and better things. And Lucy, that leaves us to the main event for Odyssey Pro Wrestling's inaugural event, Set Sail, and it was definitely worth the attraction. It was definitely a main event that was actually set up from the very beginning of the show here. And it's another one of these matches that actually was a little different than advertised, but there was a reason why it was different than it was advertised. And I think it was well worth why it wasn't the advertised main event originally. So Lucy, set the tables for us on what happened earlier in the show and the main event that we got here for Odyssey Pro Wrestling's inaugural event, Set Sail, for our worldwide audience listening here on SportsWire Radio.
Of course. So yeah, at the start of the show, we had Ethan Edwards, who announced that the women who couldn't make it, and then he introduced Ryan Hunter because he's probably one of the biggest stars of the Morecambe wrestling scene, and he was actually cut short because Big Guns Joe and Sandy Beach came out to the ring. But Sandy Beach was obviously not fit to compete. He had his arm in a sling, and he said that he'd hurt his arm when he was lifting the biggest weights in the gym, so he couldn't compete tonight. So that was a bit of a shame that we couldn't see him wrestle. Joe said he had a better opponent and he wasn't just the strongest, but also the smartest member of the roster because he's secured an amazing new tag team partner. And it was JJ Webb, who is well known to the UK wrestling scene. Everyone was excited to see him. Kind of disappointed that he was teaming with Big Guns Joe because not many people like him. But yeah, Ryan Hunter obviously had his work cut out for him, and we didn't know yet if he had a tag team partner, but we soon found out that he did. He was unfortunately subject to a 3-on-1 attack, but Chris Ridgway came out and made the save, and he was due to be his partner. And Chris Ridgway is a very well-known face in the wrestling scene in the UK. So it was huge that he was here on the roster, that it was huge that he'd come to Morecambe again to come and wrestle. So everyone was really excited for the main event for the whole night, and it definitely lived up to the anticipation. It was an absolutely massive match. You had a lot of charisma and war of words with Webb and Joe and the crowd, which Big Guns Joe is well known for. So that was as entertaining as always. But there was also some really impressive technical skills from Webb. Ryan Hunter, who is just an absolute workhorse. He is amazing in the ring and he just never gives up. I think that really played to his advantage in this match. He showed his resilience, which we all expected from him. I think him and Chris Ridgway were a great team as well. They worked together really well. Some double team moves as well, which we maybe weren't expecting because I think it was an unexpected team, but they worked together like a well-oiled machine. So that was awesome. And yeah, it was very fast-paced match all the way through. If you blinked once, you would have missed something. It was great. And you had obviously Joe and Webb try to cheat behind the referee's back, and you even had both Webb and Joe in submissions at the same time. Everyone thought that was going to be the end of the match. We all thought they were going to both tap, but they managed to escape. So that was a big moment. The action continued. It was a huge, fast-paced match, and Joe got very confident and a bit cocky, which I think he's guilty of doing quite a lot, and he pulled down his straps, which just exposed his chest for a huge chop from Ryan Hunter, who hit a hook kick, and that was the victory. And that was a huge reaction for them too. Probably, yeah, I think it was the biggest reaction of the night, I'd say, as expected from the main event. Definitely deserved the main event spot. Everyone was delighted to see Ryan Hunter come back and get the victory, as well as Chris Ridgway. Like, he played a huge part in the match as well. Definitely a well-picked partner for Hunter. So Hunter actually went on the mic as well after the match. He said thank you to everyone for coming and for all their support, and he actually announced himself as a second entrant for the championship tournament, which is going to be taking place at Stormy Waters. So that's really exciting, and I think he's definitely got a really big chance of going all the way, especially because he's got the fans behind him. I think that's going to play a big part in the championship tournament, so I can't wait to see what's going to happen.
Oh, absolutely. And we know that Ryan Hunter, from his past, whether it's wrestling in Morecambe and obviously in KOW, this guy has been a world champion before. This guy is somebody that is at the top of anybody's list when it comes to main eventers and world title contenders. So I have to certainly think that Ryan Hunter is going to be at the top of any discussion when it comes to the next Odyssey Pro Wrestling World Champion. But how big you think, Lucy, was it for the company? I know I had asked Simon this question last week, and he had known Chris Ridgway for a very long time. And I know for you, you got to be there at the event. So I want to ask you here, and how big you think was it, though, for Odyssey Pro Wrestling to have its inaugural main event led by somebody like Chris Ridgway alongside Ryan Hunter? I mean, I can't think it gets any better than that, and having your main event headlined by Chris Ridgway and Ryan Hunter.
Definitely, it was huge, and it kind of showed that Odyssey is a serious company. It might be quite a small venue, it might be quite small in some people's eyes, but it's carrying itself as a big, serious company, and that kind of this main event proved it. You've got these huge names that are really famous throughout the UK. They've come to Morecambe, and they've shown that Morecambe is the place to be for wrestling. And it's Morecambe is it's off the grid a little bit. It's not, it's not central. It's right on the coast in the northwest. But Odyssey has proved that Morecambe is the place to be. And yeah, it's put Odyssey on the map in terms of wrestling companies, I think. And I think it's just going to catapult Stormy Waters and all the other shows that they're going to do in the future to be even better, because they've set the groundworks from this very first show to just go on to bigger and better things, as you would say. It's going to be huge.
Now, I think that Odyssey Pro Wrestling in a very short amount of time will go on to bigger and better things. I know Simon had felt that Odyssey Pro Wrestling in a year from now is going to be one of the biggest wrestling companies in the UK. And that very well might be possible, especially when you have somebody like Ryan Hunter, a part of your scene, the natural born fighter, R.P. Davis, an emerging star like Two-Bit, the Rat King, obviously the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus, Mark Meltzer, Lucas Neon. I mean, it's a who's who of people. Chris Ridgway is a part of your main event. Lucy, as you know, Chris Ridgway is known not just in the UK, but he's known all over the world. He's arguably one of the biggest stars that the UK has ever produced, and certainly over the past 10 or 12 years. So I think it speaks volumes to what we were able to see here at Set Sales. Lucy, I got to ask you then probably the $1 million question that I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to ask you, and what's on a lot of people's minds, especially in Morecambe and throughout the UK and our listeners here on Sportswire Radio. So where do we go from here now that we're going on to Stormy Waters?
I think we go on to bigger feuds, the feuds that the seeds have been sown in at Set Sail. Now they're going to explore as we go forward. There's going to be some big characters that are going to clash with each other. I mean, yeah, like you said, that roster is a bit of a who's who, and everyone's got a huge personality. Everyone wants to be at the top of the card, and everyone's got a valid reason to believe they can be at the top of the card. They've just got to prove it. So that's what Stormy Waters is going to be all about. It's going to be about proving that they can back up their word in the ring. And I think from here, we just go on to bigger and better shows, consistently bringing in the fans. And if the fans are consistently loving it, then, we're doing something right. And I think that's just what we're going to aim for. Entertaining the fans, putting on a great show, and just showing what the best of the UK indie scene is all about.
And I think it was a really big deal what Odyssey Pro Wrestling and the entire team there, along with management, was able to pull off, because you think about it, right? It's been 18 months since significant wrestling has been in Morecambe. You think about everything that Odyssey Pro Wrestling had been through when it came to the different delays and the starts, and there was a lot of pressure here to deliver with this event. And not only did they deliver, they hit it out of the park. I mean, you think about 250 fans, it was sold out. You think about the crowd, you think about the wrestlers in terms of what it meant. Obviously, you worked the event. You got to see it. Obviously, Simon and Kurt, we had them both on. We got the chance to talk with Simon for a little bit about what the event meant to him in terms of working. And so I really think that this company has put itself in a path to, like we've said here, but I also think you got to give them a lot of credit, especially with everything that they were dealt with. I mean, the card here that Odyssey Pro Wrestling was dealt with, I mean, you were stacked. It was a tough card in terms of everything you had dealt with, what's going on in the world and the professional wrestling scene itself. Like I've always said here, Lucy, in America, wrestling pretty much in some places continued throughout the pandemic. I mean, Florida and parts of the South, I mean, everything was still went on back to normal. They had fans and everything, I want to say, as of May of last year. But you guys, especially in Morecambe, didn't even get an opportunity throughout this entire pandemic up until 2 weeks ago to be able to see some wrestling. So I got to ask you here, Lucy, before I get your closing thoughts, I'm going to have you back on. I could probably ask you about 10 or 11 different things, but I got to ask you, is there one or two things in particular that you're watching most when it comes to the developments between now and Stormy Waters?
I think for me, I am looking out for the wrestlers who are going to want to prove themselves. So I'm looking at Chris Ridgway, for example. I'm looking at Lucas Neon, all of them. And I want to know, are they going to be ready for Stormy Waters? Like, especially if they've perhaps lost the debut match at Set Sail, it's obviously devastating, but they've got to come back from it. And I think being able to bounce back from a defeat is very important. So I think Stormy Waters is just going to be a huge card. I can't wait to see what the championship tournament's going to shape up like. Opening matches for that are going to be vital in shaping the future of Odyssey as a whole, for the future, because the winner of that tournament is going to be a history maker, and that's going to be a huge moment in their career. So that championship tournament is going to be a big deal for Odyssey, and not just for Odyssey as a company, but for the wrestlers in their careers as well. So I'm very much looking forward to that, and yeah, I just can't wait. Your fans are going to have to get your tickets in really fast because VIP is almost sold out already. So you're going to want to be there. You don't want to miss it. I mean, if you're at Set Sail, you know what it was like. Stormy Waters are going to be even better. Mark my word.
Oh, I got a very good feeling about that, Lucy. And I'm definitely going to mark your words. I know that you're going to definitely be spot on for that. And Lucy, I'm going to give you 3 stories that I'm watching here very closely. So I'm watching the women's scenarios here between who becomes Odyssey Pro Wrestling's first women's champion. To me, I think the battle lines have been drawn. Tonga, Alexis Falcon. Alexis after her comments, Tonga after her victory against Gia Adams. Next one I'm watching is Mark Meltzer. What happens here with Mark Meltzer in terms of what this whole situation here was with between him, the Freak Show, and the Guiding Light Isaiah Quinn? That's the second one. And the third one, which I have a feeling could be a main event storyline for months and months and months if Odyssey Pro Wrestling Management allows it to happen, Lucy. And that's between Andre Decker and the Natural Born Fighter RP Davis. And Lucy, I said it here with the Natural Born Fighter RP Davis when he was on the show literally hours before Set Sail that this situation reminds me very similarly to Goldberg and Bam Bam Bigelow, 1998. Lucy, I know you're a huge wrestling fan. Check it out between Goldberg and Bigelow. There's something very similar between the two of them. The size, the strength, how this set up. I mean, I don't know if somebody was watching Monday Nitro of November 1998 when they came up this, but it's very similar to me for that. So it's got that real aggression, real street fight vibe to it. And I think that Andre Decker and the Natural Born Fighter, RP Davis, people are going to want to pay a lot of money to see. So that's my 3 stories, Lucy. We're going to see what happens between the Odyssey Pro Wrestling Women's Division, especially Alexis Falcon and Tonga. Could be an OPW World title match there for the women's title. Obviously, Mark Meltzer, Freak Show, and Isaiah Quinn. And then what happens between RP Davis and Andre Decker if Andre Decker is allowed back into Odyssey Pro Wrestling. So there is a lot to talk about here over the coming weeks and months. Lucy, I know I could have you on here for hours, but you're a very busy person. You have interviews, you got requests here to talk about Odyssey Pro Wrestling and anything else that's going out there in the pro wrestling world. And I want to give you the floor. I want to give you any closing thoughts. I cannot thank you enough for all that you do for us, all that you do for promoting professional wrestling, especially on behalf of Odyssey Pro Wrestling. Also, KOW, huge shout out to ALP. I know ALP was watching from the crowd. Also want to give a huge shout out to the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society, the Mid-Carters. I mean, Lucy, like I said, you got everything going for you. So plug all of your social media one more time for us. Anything you want to share to our worldwide audience listening here on Sportswire Radio. And the floor is yours, and I cannot thank you enough, my friend.
Oh, Tom, I can't thank you enough for having me on again. It's been great as always. Really enjoyed talking to you. And like you say, we could talk for hours about Odyssey and wrestling, but yeah, I've got limited time unfortunately, so I'll wrap up. Yeah, I think you've already done a lot of the plugging for me, but I'll just repeat it because why not? You can go follow Odyssey Pro Wrestling on Twitter, Instagram. On Twitter, it's OPW_UK. On Instagram, it's Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and it's the same on Facebook as well. Make sure you go over to the website, buy tickets. That's odysseyprowrestling.co.uk. Go get your tickets for Stormy Waters and the other shows as well that are on there, because the tickets are going to sell out really quickly. So you're going to have to be really fast if you want to join us, and you're not going to want to miss it. While you're over there on the website, you might as well go read my articles while you're at it. There's a link. You just click on articles and they'll come up. You can read all of them. Read the Set Sail report if you missed it or you want to relive it. It's all the results are in there. All of my thoughts are in there. And if you're interested in what I've got to say about wrestling, I tweet about WWE and all sorts of wrestling over on my Twitter. It's Cesaro Stan, and you can see what I get up to on my Instagram. It's LucySim01, and I'm also the president of the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society. So you got to go follow us as well. You can find us all over social media, see what we get up to. If you're listening and you happen to be at Lancaster University, make sure you sign up. You get an exclusive discount on Odyssey Pro Wrestling tickets if you do. So definitely do that. And I think everything.
Lucy, I think you did give us a lot of plugs, and obviously for a good reason. And obviously, all those great people deserve a follow. They deserve a like. And obviously, keep up to date with Lucy by going over to Twitter at Cesaro Stan, also Instagram at LucySimo1, also Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society on Twitter and Instagram as well. So you have a lot of great links out there to keep up to date with Lucy and all the great things that she is doing. She's going to be well on her way, I'm sure, to be a part of the WWE or AEW or even Impact, MLW, NWA. I got a feeling Lucy is going to be somebody that we're going to see, like many of the people in Odyssey Pro Wrestling. But Lucy, keep up the great work. Congratulations on being a part of history here a few weeks ago. I can't wait to bring you back on here next month and get us ready for Stormy Waters. And I couldn't think of a better person to bring on here to talk about Odyssey Pro Wrestling and recap it here than you, my friend. So keep up the great work, and we'll speak with you soon, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too, Tom. Thank you so much.
As we're here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with Odyssey Pro Wrestling, interviewer and writer, and president of the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society, that's Lucy Simon. As I am the host of the Sports Report and the station manager here of SportsWire Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryson. Stay tuned for more hard-hitting analysis here on SportsWire Radio and on the Sports Report, as we were just with Odyssey Pro Wrestling writer and interviewer Lucy Simons, also president of the Lancaster University Pro Wrestling Society, to recap Odyssey Pro Wrestling's inaugural event set sail, and we get ready for Stormy Waters in the middle of October. So stay tuned here for more hard-hitting analysis here on SportsWire Radio, the #1 global radio station.